Greetings and welcome to this presentation about theories of crime causation. I'm Dr. Stacy White, and we're going to be specifically talking about the psychological theories of crime causation. The objectives of this video are to learn about the main theories of crime causation, to compare theories of crime causation, to understand the contrasts of the theories of crime causation, to compare environmental variables in crime causation, to summarize what was learned about crime causation, and then to open for questions. The main theories that we will be discussing are the psychological theories of crime causation. First is the psychodynamic theory, where the internal conflict of one's ego, in other words, their self, their identity, with moral and ethical codes, their superego, and rational self, their ego. The conflict between these three, the ID, the ego, and the superego, is said to be psychodynamic theory, which we will discuss later in this presentation. Behavioral theory, essentially the behavior a person learns from their surrounding behaviors. In other words, a person who is in a group of people will likely act the same as that group of people. Cognitive theory, pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional theories, how people view the world around them in those different theories. The first we will talk about is psychodynamic. First, we'll talk about the ID. Who are we? Who we are. Our need for gratification and for our identity. We have a need and desire to identify ourselves among others. Then we have the superego, the moral and ethical codes that regulate our drives. In other words, we have a specific code to get up and go to work on time or not to get up and go to work on time, depending on which type of personality you are. And that drives us in our daily activities. And then we have our ego. Rational personality mediates between ego and superego, essentially the buffer between the two. Psychodynamic theory sees criminal behavior as a conflict between the ID, ourself, the ego, and superego. This is thought to lead to problematic behaviors. Psychodynamic theory is, however, hard to support due to the inability to test it. Next, we'll talk about behavioral theory. If a person is surrounded by criminals, they themselves are likely to become criminal. As you see here in the graphic, you have the one person, the me, surrounded by criminals. If they are subjected long enough to the actions of the criminals, they themselves may become criminal, in theory. Behavioral theory. Alfred Bandura, the social learning theory, suggests that people are not born violent, but learn to become violent by the examples they see around them. Now we'll talk about cognitive theory. Pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Pre-conventional, that which is learned as babies and or preteens or youth who learn from the external consequences of their actions. In other words, the responses or the environment to their actions. Conventional, teenagers and youngsters who begin to base behavior on society's views and expectations of them. Now we have the post-conventional, usually those persons over 20 years of age who the focus is more on judging the moral worth of society values and rules and how they relate to values of liberty, human welfare, and human rights. A simple commonality in all of these, which we have discussed, environmental. Is we have environmental pressures placed upon us for a long enough time, we then respond psychologically to those, whether it's depression, whether it's reactive criminal behavior, or other types of responses. The environment is said or believed in this theory to be a commonality in all the theories. Any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is here on this slide. Thank you and take care.